Hello, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. It is time to go in depth on the BCRC Caribbean. Director Joel Batchasingh joins us to tell us about the organization, key stakeholders, projects, and its role in Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, Ms. Batchasingh. How are you?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Rostant. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you very much for this opportunity. And good evening to all your viewers.
And thank you so much for making the time. I want to start off with you telling us about the BCRC Caribbean and what it is this organization does. Thank you.
The BCRC Caribbean is a regional organization which is affiliated with the United Nations Environmental Program that deals with waste and chemicals management for the region. The name is synonymous with a multilateral environmental agreement, the Basel Convention, which sought to establish regional centers throughout the globe in order to ensure that parties to the convention, to the multilateral environmental agreement, met their obligations under the conventions. Now, the BCRC Caribbean is based in Trinidad and Tobago and is hosted under the auspices of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago through its line ministry, the Ministry of Planning and Development. And the hosting agreement is such that it's hosted with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and what we refer to as the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Secretariat, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland. The center, of course, serves 14 countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, and as far north as the Bahamas and as far south as Suriname. And we are hoping as well that Grenada will soon be served by the BCRC Caribbean. Now, the center achieves its work through its mission and vision. And the way that we do that is that the mission seeks to collaborate with Caribbean countries in implementing their international obligations to sustainably manage waste and chemicals through technical assistance and capacity building. And the overall vision of the organization is to promote human health and the environment in the Caribbean through environmentally sound management of waste and chemicals. The center is also, we've just developed our core values, which are pinned against diplomacy, innovation, accountability, quality, and collaboration.
So, in terms of developing those core values, you said you just did it. Give us a little bit of timeline in terms of how old is the center, and I guess we can move on from there.
So the center was actually established in 1998, and it was a single desk under the Kariri, and it then migrated over the time. So it's over 20 years old, and over the time it has grown because the project portfolio of the center has grown, and with that we have grown as an organization, and we now have 13 staff supporting the work of the center.
All right, so 20 years, 13 staff, from one desk at Kariri to the center, and you said serving 14 countries, but with everything there are levels to it. So who are some of those key stakeholders with whom BCRC Caribbean liaises to fulfill this mandate, this vision, this mission?
Right, so because our remit is waste and chemicals management, naturally we have the typical environmental practitioners, so the regulatory bodies, in this case, the EMA, but our main stakeholder in Trinidad is, of course, the Ministry of Planning itself through the Environmental Policy and Planning Division, for example. And again, using the Trinidad and Tobago example, SWIMCOL, the Solid Waste Management Company, the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board, the Customs Division, as well as organizations such as the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. Now, just using that example of Trinidad, it extends into the other countries because it's always similar portfolios that we deal with. And those are core focal persons in the region. But what we're doing now is that we're also recognizing that in order to effectively treat with waste and chemicals management, we also have to start to get into the private sector. So now we're starting to move into private sector stakeholders as well. The other part of the center's work, and it's coming out from our funding agencies and just the globalization of waste and chemicals and everything else in the world, is that of inclusion of gender and indigenous peoples. So we often have as our stakeholders the NGOs or the civil service organizations, the CSOs, as well as indigenous groups. And a very good example is in Dominica, where we deal with the indigenous peoples there, which is the Kalinago people.
It makes me wonder how easy is it to have these stakeholders come together and play nice, as it were? Because I can imagine some environmentalists saying, okay, well, you're saying you're managing, but we don't even want waste passing through our waters. And is it a matter of different countries with their waters having different standards that we need to be able to say, okay, well, whatever vessel is leaving from one point is able to match all of these standards to go through? How do you navigate that?
So it segues nicely into the Basel Convention in itself, because all of the parties that we serve, those 14 countries, are signatory to the Basel Convention. And that convention deals with just what you've said, Mr. Rostant, the transboundary movement of hazardous materials. So being a party to that convention, you have certain caveats that you have to follow. So you must, if you're moving in waste that is deemed as hazardous, you have to inform other parties, and that it has to be done in a very, very transparent manner. So you just can't simply move waste. It would be deemed an illegal shipment and would essentially be returned to sender.
And that is really something to take into consideration, because these kind of conversations, many times they articulate who has power in certain ways. But at the same time, we spoke about, you said it segued into the Basel Convention. What are some of those other conventions that come to the fore when dealing with waste like this? And are there specific pieces or points that really need to be adhered to?
Okay, so we've spoken about the Basel Convention, which is our namesake, but the center does not only deal with that convention, there's another one. So the Basel Convention, as I said, deals with transboundary movement of waste, of hazardous waste. Essentially, the tenet is that if you are moving waste, your country cannot deal with a particular waste stream, such as mobile phones or electronic equipment or drilling muds, and there's another country that can treat it. It's shipped to that country in order to have environmentally sound disposal of that waste stream. The other convention that we deal with is the Rotterdam Convention, which looks at the industrial chemicals and pesticides primarily. And the third convention we deal with is one called Stockholm. And Stockholm deals with a particular group of chemicals called persistent organic pollutants. And the acronym there, just to make sure I stay within my gambit of acronyms, is POPs, P-O-P-S. And this group of chemicals, as the name suggests, is persistent, meaning that they last very long in the environment. The word organic does not refer to it being compostable, but on the contrary, that it refers to the chemistry of the chemicals, that they're quite complex chemicals and take really long to disintegrate. And they are pollutants, so they have long ranges and they can move across the globe, and they have detrimental effects, of course, on human health and the environment. The other convention, which is the newest multilateral environmental agreement, not only for waste and chemicals, but generally, is that of the Minamata Convention. And the Minamata Convention deals specifically with a single element, and that is mercury. And mercury is all around us, and we have a unique context in the Caribbean region, where for a country like Trinidad and Tobago, it is contained in CFL bulbs and those old blood pressure machines and old thermometers. But we also have a very high usage of mercury in countries such as Suriname and Guyana, where it's used to amalgamate or to bond with gold. And then it's because of the melting, the different boiling points, the mercury is vaporized, leaving you with gold essentially. So it's a very interesting context with the Minamata Convention in the Caribbean region. So those are the 4 conventions we deal with, and really covers the gambit of waste and chemicals. We do foresee in future that there's a lot of emphasis right now at the UN level on plastics, and maybe there may be a plastics convention in years to come, if I were to be called prophetic.
And that actually raises the question of calling it a seat at the table, or how much of a voice does an organization like the Center have in terms of helping determining those conventions? We speak about that, though, when we return from the break. We are speaking with Director of the BCRC Caribbean, Joel Batchasingh. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. We are speaking with Director of BCRC Caribbean, Joel Batchasingh. And just before we took the break, we're asking the question, how does the center support Trinidad and Tobago, the rest of the 14 countries that it serves, and what kind of role does the center and other organizations like it have in creating those conventions moving forward?
The creation of multilateral environmental agreements is driven by countries, and the role of the center would be one to support and provide the technical backstopping to the countries. But really and truly, if a new multilateral environmental agreement has to be developed, it has to go through a negotiating committee, and that is primarily driven by countries. But the center, of course, will be able to participate and facilitate those discussions with the members that it serves.
And hopefully whatever country it is relies on its technocrats, its subject matter experts, to be able to have the best information at hand to craft the best policies going forward. But in terms of support, definitely, how does the center support the countries that it serves?
Okay, so the way that we have to do our work, because we're hosted by the government of Trinidad and Tobago for the basics, the office and the salaries of the core staff, etc. But the way that we've facilitated the work, in addition to that subvention, is through projects. And we actively pursue projects in the waste and chemicals arena. There are particular pools of funding. So for instance, there's funding from the Global Environmental Facility, or the GEF, the Inter-American Development Bank. We work with organizations such as the United Nations Environment Program, UNIDO, and many others, the Food and Agricultural Organization as well. So we are project driven, and many of the projects that we do, we try to identify the priorities for the countries. And to answer the specific question as it relates to Trinidad and Tobago, there's several projects that Trinidad and Tobago has the benefit of under the auspices of the center. And just to name a few, I know time is limited, but there's a very interesting one we've just kicked off, which actually TTT aired for us a bit, was about the mobile phone collection project, which is a demonstration of environmentally sound management of mobile phones in Trinidad and Tobago. And we will endeavor to collect mobile phones as a pilot project at specific locations throughout Trinidad and Tobago, in collaboration with Canto, which is the regional body for telecommunications, as well as partners such as Digicel and TSTT. So we want to do a collection system so the waste does not go into the garbage, but actually goes for environmentally sound treatment. And it's being done in collaboration with a particular company that will manage the environmentally sound disposal of these phones. And we're also going to look at the actual legislation and what goes into making sure that the phones are being disposed of in an environmentally sound manner through the testing of particular guidelines. There's another project that deals with what we call electronic waste, meaning things like mobile phones, computers, and this is a regional project that Trinidad and Tobago has the benefit of. It's being done in collaboration with two countries, Suriname and Guyana. And in this project, similar to the mobile phones, we're not going to do collection. We're actually just going to look at the inventory of the waste stream, look at the legislation, but also look at the feasibility of creating economies of scale, because that has been our bugbear in the Caribbean region, that we're so small. Do we have enough volumes to generate a feasible economic business plan for it? So it will start to answer the question about the potentiality of hubs, etc., for these types of waste streams, such as e-waste. But I will say to the viewing public, please don't throw out your phones. We need to collect 10,000 at least for the first project I mentioned. Just a shameless plug there, if you didn't mind, Mr. Rostant.
No, please.
Yeah, there are many more projects we're doing. We just got approval for a very large project that Trinidad and Tobago is also a beneficiary of. It's in collaboration with 9 other countries, and it is to the tune of $10 million US. And there are several components to the project. And very simply, I will say that it looks at legislation for waste and chemicals management. It looks at actually getting rid of or disposing of legacy chemicals, so old stocks of pesticides and what we call polychlorinated biphenyls or transformer oils. And the third component is very interesting, where again, we look at waste streams such as end-of-life vehicles, e-waste, and plastics in a particular context, meaning we're looking at PVC waste. And the fourth component is a massive communications component where we share the lessons learned, not only within our region, but also with the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific SIDS, because it's a global program we're participating in.
And in terms of we have just under 3 minutes more, but looking at the fact that you're project driven and you've itemized some of those key projects that the center is involved in, how do you determine, okay, well, this is a project that we're going to put resources behind? Is it one that can be scalable? Is it one that you have resource people on the ground? You can have more partnerships, because there's also been conversation about how it is people can access the Green Fund. How do you go about doing what it is you decide to do?
Once we identify, we have a project steering committee, and we identify the priorities of the countries, we actively seek out the funding opportunities. And we at the center actually craft the projects. Let, of course, for transparency purposes, allow the countries to review and endorse the projects, submit them, and we literally hope that we get through with the projects. But our portfolio is quite large, and we've really grown in a very short time, and have been garnering quite a lot of support for the waste and chemicals agenda in the region. It has been challenging during COVID-19 because it requires consistent communication, but we've endeavored to do so. A bit of nagging on our parts, much to the chagrin of our constituents, but nonetheless, we've been quite successful in ensuring that good communication has ensured our project success with our stakeholders.
And speaking of good communication, how do people interact with you, engage with you, find out, okay, this is what you are focusing on right now, so that they can lend the support?
Yeah, there are many mediums, Mr. Rostant, and it starts with our website, www.bcrc-caribbean.org. Attached to that website is a specific website that deals with persistent organic pollutants, www.stopthepops.com. So you can visit those websites. For the younger persons who are viewing us, you can visit our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And for those who are also pursuing opportunities, we do have a LinkedIn profile where we post potential opportunities for persons to participate in as well. But really, we're quite we're very up to date with our social media. So please like us on whichever social media platform you prefer, and do follow us for updates, etc.
And in the closing seconds of this, what is the one takeaway you want people to think about when it comes to managing waste, Ms. Batchasingh?
It's really it's difficult to give the best answer. I would say is that we have to make sure that we have the systems in place, and that's the challenge for waste and chemicals management. The systems aren't quite in place, but I would say that systems are being developed. So if you do have a mobile phone, don't just toss it in the bin. Think twice. I would encourage things like composting, removing that organic waste from your mixed waste at your home, and simple things like that. But the challenge for us now is to have that access to somewhere to deal with your used items, your used phones, your used vehicles, waste oil, etc. So we're in that process, and hopefully the next time you interview me, I'll be able to answer with more conviction on this subject as it relates to the actual disposal. But right now, I'd say try and get the information out there, get informed. There are ways to do some environmentally sound management of the waste stream.
The longest journey begins with one footstepper, and it is very important to have that, the energy in place, moving from a place of personality. I want to do it because I know it's good for the environment at policy level. But we want to thank you very much, Jewel Batchasingh, BCRC Director, and on behalf of the entire news team, I'm Dike Rostant. Thank you for joining us.